Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibis? Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. We're going to jump back into the last half of this interrogation video with Sarah Boone in the suitcase murder. But first, music fact of the day. Keith Moon from The Who. Well, I tell you, his teachers did not think much of him back when he was in school. In fact, his art teacher called him a derogatory word, the R word, artistically, and said he was idiotic in other respects. Man, his music teacher said he has great ability, but must guard against a tendency to show off. I guess that tendency to show off made him a multi-millionaire and served him well. There you go. Now you know. On the last episode, if you remember, the investigators asked Sarah if she did not remember making the video, because according to Sarah, she wasn't drunk in her earlier recounting of that day and evening. Sarah says, just because I went upstairs and just because you're drunk doesn't mean you, and the investigator interrupts and says, you said you were not drunk. You had your wits about you. You said you don't like not having your wits. In my experience, if somebody can't remember doing something to the extent of making 2 videos and taking a photo, they're intoxicated. Sarah says, okay, I understand where you all are coming from. The investigator tries to talk and Sarah says, I get it. The investigator said, we're trying to figure out this video, so explain it to us. We're listening. And Sarah said, I did. We were playing. And then I thought my plan was not to go upstairs and go to sleep. My plan was he'll wake up and be here any minute. The investigator said, but you willingly went upstairs and went to sleep. No one forced you to go upstairs. She said, and my plan wasn't also to leave him in the suitcase. The investigator said, so why didn't you take him out? She said, because I went upstairs and then I fell asleep. The investigator said, but why didn't you consciously think, hey, he's asking to come out? Sarah says, I didn't do it intentionally. The investigator says, what do you think's going to happen if you leave somebody in a confined space like that? She said, well, I thought by not tipping it all the way, it would be okay. My plan was not to leave him in the floor. I was waiting for him to come upstairs. And the investigator said, and when he didn't, Sarah said, I fell asleep. The investigator said, you were up there 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, somebody not coming up, knowing the last time you saw him, he was in the suitcase. 30 minutes later, you're like, maybe I should go check on him. The investigator says, you said you were up there 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, somebody not coming up there, knowing the last time you saw him, he was in the suitcase. 30 minutes later, you're like, maybe I should go check on him. Maybe I shouldn't. Sarah interrupts and says, no, that's an assumption. What are you all thinking? The investigator said, we're asking. Sarah says, it's the drinking. That's what it is. I thought he was okay. The investigator said, but he's telling you he's not. He's telling you, Sarah, I can't breathe. He's saying your name and you're like, that's my name. Don't wear it out. Sarah says, guys, that's how we are with each other. Nobody understands our relationship. This whole suitcase thing never happened before. The investigator said, would you leave someone else in a suitcase? Would you put Lucas in a suitcase? Because it was a joking matter. You put him in there jokingly. You love Lucas, right? Sarah said, I wouldn't do it to him. It's not like, again, I don't think you all understand. That's not my intention. Y'all don't have any idea what I've done for him. Honey, it don't matter what you've done for him. It matters what you did to him in the end. The investigator said, but your actions, you get to the point to where you've done so much for somebody and they don't show you any appreciation. Sarah says, no, he did. The investigator said, not by your words in the video. I don't get that. You bring up the fact that he's choking you and you can't breathe. That's how you felt when he cheated on you. And Sarah says, no. The investigator said you couldn't breathe, and you verbally said several times, told him just F you. They say they could show her, but she doesn't want to watch the video. Sarah says, when I say cheating, it's just on his phone. The investigator said, what would someone say to someone about leaving him in the suitcase? Sarah says, do you guys think it's like, oh, good, I got him in there. Now I'm going to go to sleep? Is that what you guys are trying to assume? The investigator said the video is the opposite of what you portrayed to us. It's not matching up to the statements you gave us in the car. The injuries are not consistent with what you've told us. The video explains itself. And Sarah says, you don't think I've thought of that? Wait, no, if you don't mind, please. She repeats the statement about, oh, good, I got him in there. Now I'm going to go to sleep. Is that what you're assuming? And the investigator said, that's what you've told us. That's not an assumption. The video shows he cannot get out on his own. Sarah said, when I unzipped it with one finger. The investigator said, from the outside. Sarah said, but it had a hole in it. The investigator says, so you're claiming it had a paper clip. So that's what assisted you in doing it. Sarah said, I thought it had a paper clip in it. It's the zipper part that's broken. The investigator said, you were able to unzip it from the outside. That's how they're designed. Sarah says, but on the inside too. Well, apparently not, Sarah, unfortunately for George. The investigator said, I don't know why he wouldn't have gotten himself out if he could. Sarah says, I don't know if he saw where the hole was. The investigator said, that's what I'm saying. He was in one position where his head would be. We should be able to see fingers, and we don't see anything. We see no movement of him trying to unzip it or physically unzipping it at all. All we see is pushing up, trying to push out of it. Sarah says, please don't assume. The investigator said, I'm not assuming. I follow evidence. Sarah said, my intention was not, again, oh, good, I got him in there. Now I'm just going to go to sleep. The investigator says, what do you think someone knowing nothing about this or hears a little bit of this? Oh, they were playing around in a suitcase. Sarah interrupts and says, she's been drinking and she probably went to sleep. That's what happened. The investigator said, you put him in, so why didn't you take him out? Because I went upstairs and fell asleep. The investigator says, no, I mean, before you went upstairs, you consciously had to walk upstairs. You remember bed because you were able to give us a time frame for that, and you specifically told me you got upstairs. Sarah said, my intention was not for this to happen. I'm sick about it. I'd never do anything like this. I've never done anything like this in the past. I'm sick especially with that. She said, I thought I couldn't sleep last night. The investigator interrupts and says, here's the thing. You tell us the last night you vividly remember this. You both were laughing. You put him in the suitcase. He has two fingers sticking out and you go to bed. Now we see something totally different, and it actually shows you upset and again using derogatory terms to him when he's begging for his life to be let out of that suitcase. So we're not assuming, we're telling you what's on there. So then Sarah tries to explain this a different way. The fingers. So it just happens that whenever I was videotaping had just happened and it didn't have that in it. The investigator points out again, you see him pushing to get out, but you don't see any holes. He says, I don't know if you had too much to drink and you zipped it all the way up. Sarah says, I did not zip it all the way up. She repeats that. The investigator says, based on what you're telling us, he should have been able to get out. Sarah said, I did not zip it all the way up. It's horrific, okay? It's terrible, horrific. I don't think I will ever be right because of this. Ever be right dealing with everything else that I have in my life personally, and this is who I loved. It was not intentional. I will put my hand on a Bible. It was not intentional. I would not do that to him or anyone else. And the investigator said, but you did. She said, not intentional. The investigator said, you intentionally went to bed. He doesn't come. You don't go down to check on him. You say you weren't intoxicated. Sarah says, intoxicated? You could tell I had been drinking. The investigator says, so if you weren't intoxicated, then why would you ever leave someone in a suitcase that's begging to get out? That's telling you they can't breathe. Sarah said, if I hadn't been drinking, you still think it would be the same thing where it's like, hop in, I'm going to go to sleep? Is that what you all are trying to do? The investigator said, I'm not trying to do anything. I'm simply asking you to explain what happened. Sarah says, everything's fine and dandy. Investigator said, I wouldn't call that fine and dandy. Sarah said, for me to tell you this again, mind you, I've been without him for a day now. I mean, I don't know what you want me to tell you because this was not in any way, shape, or form, hand on the Bible, intentional. Okay, I didn't kill him. The investigator said, you left him there to teach him a lesson. Sarah shouts, I didn't mean to leave him in there. That's what I'm trying to tell you. The investigator said, got up and walked away. How is that not intentionally leaving him in there? Sarah says, because I'm looking at the hole, knowing that it's there. He'll get out, no problem. The investigator again points out she didn't go back to check on him for 30 minutes. She says, I'm in the bed. The investigator says, you admit to moving the suitcase over, so you roll it over. Sarah says, I didn't want it to be like that. She's kind of angry. Her body language is a little bit hostile. She has her hands under her chin. The The investigator says you didn't want him to be upside down. How do you even get it upside down? The investigator has the video playing in the background. You can hear George pleading to be let out, and then you hear her talking to him. Sarah says, you guys are killing me right now. The investigator says, I just want you to hear. At this point in the video, you hear her tell him to shut the F up. Sarah says, well, that's how he talks to me most of the time. I don't know how you want me to say it. The investigator really is just trying to get her rattled. You see it. These tactics are amazing. I love watching interrogations, and it's working. Again, he asks, I'm just wondering what you expect to happen to someone when you leave them in a suitcase. And Sarah very forcefully says, I didn't mean to leave him in there, okay? The investigator said, well, what's your reasoning for not calling 911 sooner? Sarah said, because I didn't know what to do and how horrific it was. I called Ryan. That's her ex-husband. 5 minutes later, I called you guys. Not even 5 minutes. Nonetheless, I was trying to do CPR. I had to get him out, then called you guys, and I was continually doing CPR. With dispatch on the phone, he had me count out loud to help me focus on what I was doing. The investigator said, I mean, you could sit here all day long and say, I thought he was going to get himself out, but he didn't. And you went upstairs and you stayed there 30 minutes before you fell asleep. But I can say, too, you chose to never at any point during those 30 minutes walk back and check on him. She puts her hands out. Wait 1 second. Because I know, like with you all, you can continually ask me timeframes where I told you I don't bother even looking at the clock most of the time. So it's a guesstimate. So for all I know, maybe it was 10 minutes. Boy, is she trying to turn the Titanic around at this point. The investigator says that the point is you left when he was begging for help. You went upstairs, regardless of how long you were up there. You left, and then Sarah interrupts and says, again, I thought he was crying wolf, like I said. The investigator said, okay, so he was begging to be let out. What's your reasoning for not letting him out? He asked multiple times on the video to be let out and said he can't breathe. Sarah says, number one, I had no idea it was going to end like that. Number two, I'll give you 5 minutes or so in there. The investigator says, 5 minutes for what? Based on the video, one is at 11:12 p.m. The next one is at 11:23 p.m. So you gave him at least 11 minutes per video recordings. He asked multiple times, I mean, why did you not let him out? It's just a simple question. Sarah says, to be honest with you, I don't know. The investigator asked if she was punishing him, and she says no. The investigator says, well, that's what you're saying in the video. This is what you get. This is what you make me feel like. Sarah says, see, and then it all backfired on me like it's all backfired on me. And I understand the severity of all this. And then she yells, it's awful. I will never drink alcohol again. I don't care what it is in any way, shape, or form. Sister, you're going to be drinking some prison hooch if my instincts are right. Investigator says, I don't understand the reason for leaving him in when he's begging to get out. Sarah says, what I have a feeling was it's the whole time frame thing. The investigator's like, I don't care about a time frame. So in the bag, then she interrupts and starts yelling, my gosh. The investigator says, and you say F you. Sarah says, for the whole few minutes he was in there, like the investigator says, 11 minutes in one video, when he's begging for his life, telling you he can't breathe, let me out, and you say F you, why don't you just let him out? What are you trying to prove to him? There was obviously something in your head that you were thinking of when he was asking to be let out, and then she interrupts and says, again, it's the boy, call it. She says, calling wolf. The investigator said, okay, but where does this game end? Sarah aggressively says, obviously the wrong way. The investigator said, so what was your intention for leaving him in there? Sarah said, it's not fair. You guys are trying to, again, oh, he's in there, night, night. The investigator said, yeah, that's what happened. Absolutely. And Sarah says really loudly, not intentionally. The investigator said, you got off your couch, walked up the flight of stairs, got in your bed thinking he was going to get out, and he didn't. And you still didn't go down. Sarah interrupts and says, it's the whole 30-minute thing you guys are trying. The investigator says, I don't care, Sarah. Sarah says, whatever. For all I know, it's 10 minutes. The investigator says he's begging for his life, telling you he can't breathe. Sarah says, I don't know what you want me to tell you. I didn't intentionally mean for this to happen. The reason that I'm being repetitive and reading out all these questions as they were spoken on this video is because it's interesting to see the subtle changes in her story, as well as the line of questioning, how they're trying to get her mad, maybe wanting her to explode, say something she's trying not to say. But I think it's a good part of the whole story. I mean, this was a almost 2-hour interrogation, and a lot of it was the same. But if you notice very subtle differences starting to come out in her story, I think at this point, Sarah thought she was going back home after this interview ended, by the way. Sarah said she didn't have any motivation for leaving him in there. It was he and I having a great day, fooling around, being stupid, and apparently me going upstairs and going to, and then she says, hitting the bed, not going to sleep, where it's like, I'm tired now. The investigator said, that's a good analogy for the day, excluding the fact that he's got a bump on the back of his head, a bump on the front of his head, and his lip is busted. And Sarah says, oh my gosh, I don't know what you all want me to tell you. Like, this is not fair at all. And you're assuming that's from me. The investigator said, well, where else did it come from? Say it's opposite and you were in the suitcase and you're asking to be let out. Would you hope that person would let you out? Sarah says, eventually, I mean, I'm guessing, I'm blaming it on the wine. You guys are assuming that's what I did. The investigator says, when we got there, you said you pulled him out of the suitcase. You went to bed. We're not assuming. Well, that's what you told me on a sworn recorded statement yesterday, because when I said, oh, you went upstairs and you passed out, you were like, no, I did not pass out. You got attitude with me because you thought I was assuming you were drunk. So that's an assumption. And guess what? You corrected me. You were very adamant about the fact that both of you had your wits about you. What's your favorite word to use? And then Sarah says, compass ventus. The investigator says, you used that today too to say you both were within your wedge. There's 2 empty bottles of wine. Sarah says, but we didn't drink both of them. The investigator said, I think you did. Sarah says, we didn't. The investigator said they were both purchased yesterday, so I don't see how you didn't because they weren't there the day before. Sarah said that one was. The investigator said there are 2 Publix receipts from yesterday. The only thing purchased were single bottles of wine, 2 of them. So we have each bottle of wine empty in your garbage can that you or he purchased, but you 2 would have consumed together. At this point, Sarah is flustered. She said, well, the investigator said there's receipts, so it's not even worth the, and then Sarah interrupts. So I don't know what you guys are. I don't know. The investigator said, we're just hoping to figure out what was the motivation? She said there was no motivation. The investigator says, well, we're watching a video that after talking to you, everyone was laughing and fun. Now we're watching a video where it's not laughing and fun, and he's begging for his life, and you are in a very angry voice telling him to F off. Sarah says, no. The investigator says, yes, that's absolutely what it was. It's not an assumption. The video is there. We played it for you. She says, so you guys think I intentionally, the investigator said, you did it. It doesn't matter what we think. I walked up the stairs. I got into the bed. That was intentional. There's no way of getting around that. You intentionally did that. Nobody drug you up there. You didn't float up the stairs. Sarah says, okay, well, it's not fair that you guys keep trying to say that that's what I did. The investigator says, I don't know what to tell you. Telling us you didn't go upstairs? Sarah gets very aggressive. She said, again, there's a hole in the suitcase. I unzipped it from the hole with one finger. The investigator says, well, the hole didn't do him no good, did it? Sarah said, but he could push it open. The investigator said, no, he couldn't. The video of him pushing up, if he could push it open, why wouldn't he have gotten himself out? Why would he beg you to open it? Tell you he can't breathe. So she puts her hands together, kind of like a praying thing, and says, okay, if someone can do something for themselves, they're going to do it. They don't need assistance unless they need assistance. The investigator said, because he couldn't, because it was zipped all the way. Sarah says, okay, it wasn't. She starts yelling, I intentionally didn't zip it all the way. He nor I. The investigator says, well, he's dead as a result of your actions. Sarah said, we didn't lay hands on each other. The investigator said, he is dead as a result of your actions. And Sarah says, I understand that. The investigator says, you 2 didn't lay hands on each other? She says, no, I don't have anything. Whatever this is, motioning to her head. And she says, his head wounds, it's not fair. Just because he has those, automatically blame it on me. Well, what about when you have your injuries and he gets arrested? Is that not fair? He has injuries, you have injuries. And Sarah says, really? Really? I don't have any injuries because he and I have not been at it with one another. The investigator says, so every time you fight, you both hit each other. So you should have probably gone to jail. And those times that he went to jail for domestic. Sarah says, the one time I did, but he completely trashed the police report because that's nothing what happened. She said, the reason I got taken in was because my story was different than his. I'm being portrayed as this abuser. The investigator says, we're not saying he didn't abuse you. And Sarah said, I'm the one being portrayed as the abuser. I've never dealt with anything like this before. I don't know what to do, how to do it, and I always know what to do and how to do it. The investigator said, we're going with what you're saying, but we find stuff that negates what you're telling us. Sarah says, I don't even remember doing that. The investigator says, you say we're assuming stuff, but what we're simply doing is telling you what we saw in that video. Sarah says, I understand because I don't remember that. The investigator said that doesn't mean it didn't happen just because you don't remember it. And Sarah said, so is the texting thing about me? You guys are scaring me. I don't know what to expect. I had questions of things that needed to be taken care of. The investigator said, what are your questions? The investigator says, I have one last question. I mean, you realize you're the person who killed him, right? Sarah said, I thought about that. The investigator said, you left him in a bag when he's begging you, saying, I can't breathe, let me out. You say, F you, got up off the couch, went upstairs and left him in the bag. Sarah said, no, I would never do that to George. And then she starts yelling, not intentionally. Investigator said, you did. Sarah says, alcohol is a crappy thing. The investigator says, alcohol the reason you killed him? And Sarah says, you all. She stands up. The investigator immediately tells her to sit back down. I did not intentionally kill him, okay? I don't know what it is I need to do or how to do it or what to say. Everyone knows what I've done for George and love him and continuously help him throughout his life with me and made him a happier, better person. The investigator said, yeah, but everybody has their limits. Sarah says, so when we're in a good place right now, I'm going to snap. The investigator said, you did. I got you on video screaming, F you. This is what it feels like when you're choking me. This is what it feels like. And Sarah says, which was however long ago. The investigator said, but videos from last night. You said it clearly. So there's still feelings towards it. You wouldn't say it if you didn't feel it. She says, but I would never do that. The investigator says, but it happened and you did it. She said, but that's after being playful and having a good day. The investigator says, well, I'd hate to see a bad day. And the investigator said, nobody's laughing on that video except for you. She said, y'all are making me out to be a person I'm not, have, or will ever be. The investigator said, or are you a different person when you're drunk? People have different personalities after they consume alcohol. Sarah said, it's both of us. And again, you all are assuming that the marks he has on him are from me. The investigator said, we asked you where they came from. She says, I have no idea. The investigator says, nobody else was there. I have no idea. I swear, I did not lay a hand on him. The investigator said, you just zipped him in the bag and you flipped the bag around several times. And she said, I didn't do that intentionally. The investigator says, you told us you did. Sarah said, when he was upside down, the investigator said, you can't get in the suitcase upside down because the video shows the suitcase. Sarah said, nobody else was there. The investigator said, the video shows the suitcase in several different positions. It had to be on its back with the lid open for him to get in there, for you to zip it up. Then it shows the other side with him in it. So you had to flip it to there. There's another video with him again on his back. So you had to. Sarah said, I'm leaving it like this. Please. I'm leaving it like this. I did not intentionally do this. No malicious, she said, content or effort toward this. No malicious. The investigator said, well, if that helps you sleep, but you're not sleeping. So then Sarah says, well, last night, maybe I got an hour in. The investigator said, your voice, you can hear the maliciousness, the F you. You don't talk to people like that. It's not like a comment and turns to the other investigator and says, hey, Scott, F you. We're trying to give you an opportunity and it is what it is. Sarah says, there's no maliciousness towards that. No one who sees this is going to think that's okay. So I would probably be telling myself that. Sarah says, my intent was not for that to happen. The investigator, hey, but you went upstairs and went to bed. Maybe you passed out. Sarah said, I was waiting for him. And then the whole time frame thing. The investigator does air quotes and says, waiting for him. You can't fly up the stairs. No one can take you up there. You go up, lay on the bed, and you wait. Who cares? Is it 5 minutes or 30 minutes? He's begging for his life. He's begging to get out. You go upstairs. It doesn't matter, so you can get the time frame out of your mind. You just keep lying. And Sarah says, who's lying about what? The investigator says, and now you're drunk. Sarah said, oh, I never said I was drunk. The investigator said, you did here today. Sarah said, alcohol. The investigator says, so you want to blame the alcohol? So you did this sober? Sarah says, I've already told you both we were drinking. The investigator says, but you don't want to admit you're drunk. Sarah said, this has changed my life. The investigator, yep, that's a true statement. They ask again about George saying he can't breathe. And she says, if you don't know George, though, I thought he was a boy crying wolf. Then again, would you put your son in there? And he says, I can't breathe. Are you going to open it? You said you would never put your son in a suitcase. You'd only put George in. Sarah says, no, George got in the suitcase. The investigator says, you zipped it up. She says, not all the way around, not intentionally to leave him in there. The investigator said, but that's what happened. Sarah says, are you trying to have me admit that? Because I will never admit that because it's not true. The investigator said, I'm basically stating that as fact because that's what happened. You videotaped him asking to be let out. Sarah says, I don't know what you want me to say other than it was not malicious or intentional. I don't know what or how I can say it. I love George. Love him to this day still. Well, it's just a day later, Sarah. The investigator said, well, love can make you do crazy things. Sarah said, I never gave up on him, okay? While I'm here today, I'm still not giving up on him. The investigator said, well, you gave up checking up on him, wouldn't let him have a suitcase. Sarah says, oh gosh. The investigator says, you gave us a completely different story and you said this was such a laughing matter. She said it was fun all day. All day it was fun. The investigator, I don't think anyone would look at that video and think George is having fun right now. Sarah says, so why is it you all think that y'all don't know me? Why would I do that? Especially having a 9-year-old son. It was fun. The investigator says, obviously it stops being fun because you're screaming at him. Sarah says, I'm not screaming at him. The investigator changes the subject and asks if she is still going to let them swab her fingernails. She says, go for it. The investigator gets up to go get the kit. Asks Sarah if she wants more water, and she says no and asks, what about this? She holds up a paper, and the investigator says when they get back, they'll talk about that. The other investigator says he doesn't understand how her story changes so much, and Sarah says, changes? Please help me understand. The investigator says it went from laughing, but the demeanor of the whole situation changes. It's not a funny laughing matter. He's not laughing. Sarah said, I didn't think he was being serious, but the investigator points out you absolutely were being serious. Sarah says, I don't know what to tell you. It was a great day. It didn't end well, obviously. The investigator said, here's what gets me, though. You don't remember taking videos. You don't know where he is. You don't remember him being in the suitcase, and you're still telling me that you had your wits about you. Sarah says, see, that's the thing, but you can clearly tell that I had been drinking some. The investigator said, I had several people come up to me in that complex and say, you were drunk on a daily basis. Sarah says, oh my gosh, right? Talk to the property manager. The investigator said, actually, these are your neighbors. The property manager doesn't live next to you. Your neighbors see you every day. You went to 2 neighbors to ask to use their restroom, and they told you no and turned you away. You had to go across the way to someone else's. She says, no, Kim and Eli, or Kim is not a nice person. She's just automatically not nice. Even after me and Lucas went over there and introduced ourselves, she's just not a nice person. The investigator says, then why do you think she'd let you use her restroom in her house? Sarah says, because Eli was there, and Eli comes over and talks to us sometimes, which I think makes Kim mad because he talks to us. They're like super standoffish all the time. My neighbors down the way, their toilet was broken and they had stuff in the bathroom. So they're like, go over there and try over there. The investigator points out in the townhomes, there's 2 bathrooms, one on the first floor, one on the second floor. Sarah said, I wouldn't let somebody use my personal bathroom. That's what the downstairs one is for. So I walk across the way, and of course they let me in. They're families. I hope it doesn't get them in trouble, but he's over here illegally, so he's trying to get to work on getting his green card. Man, she's trying to throw some innocent neighbor that let her use the potty under the bus. The investigator said, well, what does that have to do with you using the restroom? Sarah says they didn't want to be involved. The other investigator comes in. Sarah asks her, who's coming? The investigator says, they're coming to do your fingernails. You don't have to allow us to do it, just so you know. Sarah says, I don't have a problem. She says, okay, so I'm not getting my phone or Lucas's laptop back. The investigator says, not today. Sarah says, what does that mean? It's almost like she's fishing to see if she's going to be arrested. That's kind of how I took it. The investigator said, we're still going through everything. And Sarah said, oh, that's fine. The investigator said, you're the one telling us there's videos we need to see on it. So we need to do our due diligence that we go through everything. And then Sarah says, see, that backfires on me now too, because now you all think I had even more, she does air quotes, intent to do what I did. And she admits it right there, by the way, to do what I did. So see, there you go, a little slip up, which was not intentional. Sarah asks if they will inform his probation officer about his death, and they say, no, we can only inform his parents, but you could inform his probation officer. Sarah says, so other than this, and she kind of taps the computer, what was his cause of death? The investigator said that's still pending. They're going to hold his body for the additional day to see if more bruises turn into something bigger. Also, the medical examiner was doing other tests. So all that's pending. Sarah says, so that couldn't have been because of him being in the suitcase. The investigator said, that's actually what she's determining. I asked if those on his head could have come from him being in the suitcase, and the medical examiner did not think so. Sarah says, I didn't touch him, nor did he touch me. So I don't know if you all know how to do this because that's what I was getting ready to ask. So are you all updating his parents today or when you get the final whatever? The investigator said, what does it matter what or when we tell his parents? We're going to have to talk to them. Sarah said, okay, but it's all going to come down on me. The investigator said, what do you mean it's going to come down on me? Who said that? Sarah said, what is it you're going to tell them? The investigator said, we're going to give them an update just like we gave you, an update on the autopsy. Sarah said, okay, so whatever bruise and one around the head. The investigator said, here's the thing. We had to deliver the news to them last night that their son was dead. There's not a whole lot of conversation that goes on after that. Sarah says, got it. Perfect. So I don't know if I ask you guys or how I find this out other than talking to his parents, which is not going to happen. Probably a terrible idea. How do you guys suggest me finding out about a funeral? The investigator said, that's not even something that's probably been talked about between the family. That's not something we ask. We have no way of, and then Sarah interrupts and said, I didn't know. That's why I'm asking. The investigator explains it'll be up to the family to make those arrangements. She just told you this quick. Just being told last night, I'll pretty much be willing to wager they have not even considered what they're going to do yet. The body can't even be released. Sarah said, I've been there with parents, grandparents, uncles, so I don't know if I have the right to or not, but I was going to call his former employees whom he really cared for and let them know. The investigator said, you can call whoever you want. Sarah says, I just don't want to do something I'm not supposed to do. How do I go about getting his wedding ring, engagement ring? The investigator explains it's at the medical examiner's office. It'll come to us and eventually it'll be released to the next of kin. Sarah says, yeah, okay, I bought it for him. The investigator said, hey, that's a civil issue. It was on his finger. It goes to them. They're the ones that are going to release it. We don't have any say in that. Sarah says, so I won't get it back. Sarah then shows them a paper that she's been given, the one that she kind of waved in front of the investigator when she was going to get the person to do her fingernails. It looks like a list of evidence maybe that they took. So for all of this, Sarah says, how do I find out what's been found? The investigator says, what do you mean? Sarah says, pillow with stain, swabs of stained front pillowcase. The investigator says all that will be sent to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement where testing will be done. Sarah says, so, and then whatever, with blood and the necktie with blood was from the suitcase. The investigator said, correct. I'm not sure what that meant. Just transcribed it out. Then she says, you'll see it in there. The baseball bat for Lucas. This is just his phone, my phone, and the laptop. The investigator explains they're early in their investigation. It's not an overnight process. So then Sarah asks, what's next? They're going to come swab your fingers. Sarah says, I'm talking about the long run. Do I need to be doing something? The investigator says, I can't tell you what to do. Sarah says, I don't understand. Are you guys just going to, because it sounds like to me, I'm being accused of something that was not intentional. I'm being accused of it, and it's a handful of things that I'm being accused of, okay? So I don't want to be at home with Lucas and you guys show up. The investigator says, we're still investigating that. I don't know what you want me to tell you. Sarah says, so is there going to be concrete whatever? And then it's like, this is what it is kind of thing, because I've done the whole court thing. I've done the whole attorney thing, and then whatever. So I'm not admitting to anything about being intentional, and I killed George. That's not the situation, but it's trying to be pinned on me. She says this twice. That was not my intent. It's trying to be pinned on me. So however or whatever it is I need to do in order for that to be proven, then I need to do so, which is why I'm trying to get my ducks in a row. So that's why I'm asking, what's the next step other than me getting my nails swabbed? The investigator said, I mean, if you want me to tell you how not to be accused of a crime, is that what you're asking? Like, I don't know what you want me to do. Sarah says, so I'm trying to prepare myself for whatever may need to be done. So I got to take that for myself. The investigator says, I mean, I think you're doing just fine. You came and talked. Sarah said, I just don't want you guys to again show up and Lucas is in the house. The investigator said, well, we did tell you yesterday that we don't want to do anything around your son, hence why you came to us. I don't know what you think or why you think that's going to change. She talks about her ex-husband. He's so happy I'm staying at the house, Brian, like so happy. I'm not going back to the house, to my house, for however long I could stay over here because I want whatever to blow over. And again, if you don't mind me asking, so for whatever it is you all are claiming from the videos, which is what you're going to tell us parents, is like, oh, by the way, she did. The investigator said, did what? It really doesn't matter what we tell the parents. And Sarah said, oh, yeah, it is. Steel to the fire. The investigator said, well, we can't hide things. And I don't know. I'm not saying we're going to go tell them every single thing we have. But again, this is the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Everything is public record. So eventually this will all come out. You're making it sound like we're going to tell them something. So then your life is in danger. And I don't like that accusation. So let's just nip that right in the bud right now. Sarah said, well, that's what's going to happen. So technically there's no concrete report right now. Now, the investigator at this point is getting flustered and is just like, I don't know what I'm going to tell them. Let's just leave it at that. And just like you don't know why you went upstairs, I don't know what I'm going to tell them. Sarah says, can I call you the way I did last time? The investigator said, yeah, my phone is an open line. Sarah says, I get it. I get it. It looks really bad. So that's what scares me. Like, what do I do? What do I need to plan on? I promise you on my son's life, it was not intentional. I promise you on Lucas's life, it was not intentional. The investigator says, I don't know. I can't say I know anything about you. I don't know what would be a true statement. You're promising on your son's life. That's fine. Sarah said, that's how much it means. I hope you take that to heart, please. The investigator said, it's documented you said that. Sarah said, do you have any idea when I can get my phone back? And technically, that's not my laptop. It's Lucas's. You'll see all the games he has on there. The investigator said, as soon as we can get that back to Lucas, we will. As soon as we can release your phone, we will. But we have no way of being able to tell you because we don't have control over their caseload and how they arrange what they do. But get this, the investigator said at this point, I think with everything else that's going on, that should probably be at the bottom of your list of worries. Sarah said, I'm trying to make Lucas happy so he can have his laptop back. The investigator asked, does Brian, his dad, have a laptop? She says it's for work. He doesn't want it breaking or being dropped. It's not a big deal. There's nothing on the laptop anyway, so will you keep me posted? That's my thing. I'm trying to figure out what I need to do in the meantime. The investigator says, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Sarah says, but you all have more information than I do. Where it's like, yeah, you might want to, or yeah, you might want it. The investigator says, we have more information on what? We told you everything we have. Everything. Most of that, by the way, we got from you. Sarah said, like I was telling her, yeah, like it's bad, which I swear on my son's life was not intentional. So that's why I'm trying to figure out what I need to do for myself going forward with this. Nonetheless, with his family and all of you showing up with Lucas in the house. So I guess you're going to call me tomorrow, or do we need to come back down here? The investigator says, I'll chat with you next time. I have no idea when I'm going to call you next. Then Sarah asks about the report coming out the next day. The investigator says, the report is generated through us and the sheriff's office is a public entity. So if someone were to come request something, then Sarah interrupts. No, I'm talking about his autopsy. The investigator again, she's waiting, doing follow-up stuff, pending further stuff. Sarah says, so after this, what? I'm done for now? And then there's like crickets, silence, total silence. Sarah says, how long does this stuff take to get back? She lifts up this paper of evidence, which has obviously what they took swabs of or evidence they took from the house. The investigator said, you won't get back the swabs and stuff. Sarah says, I hope you all can really both truly understand that that was not my intent and I miss him a lot. The investigator says, but my question has remained the same. What do you expect to happen to somebody when you leave them in that position? Sarah says, I don't know because I've never done that before. The investigator, well, why haven't you ever done it before? Sarah said, why would I? The investigator, exactly. Why would you do it now? Sarah said, I clearly have said why. Then the investigator just says, yeah, you say it wasn't intentional. I'm not trying to force you to say something you don't know. Sarah said, it's pinning. The fact that you guys would assume that I'm that kind of person. You don't know me. What time is it, please? The investigator said it's 4:46. Sarah said, in itself, for me to have to live with getting him out of the suitcase and doing what I did as punishment, enough. I think that's why I haven't slept. That's all I see. So that right there says something. Not my intention. I have to live without him now, nonetheless. Punishment in itself. The investigator, yes, definitely a tragic situation. Sarah says with alcohol, and it's unfortunate that stupid things like this happen. Nonetheless, I have to live without him now. The investigator said, yeah, his daughters too. Sarah said, are you trying to make it worse? The investigator says, sorry. Then she says, are you trying to make it worse? And the investigator says, make what worse? And she says, how I feel. Forensics come in. The investigator tells Sarah, this is who took pictures of you the day before. The investigator says, okay, Sarah, you're not free to go. Do you promise everything you said was the truth or everything we talked about today? Sarah says, yes. What do you mean? They forgot to ask her if she promised and swore. So they're doing that at this point in the video, asking if everything she said has been true and accurate to the best of her knowledge. She said that it wasn't intentional. The investigator says, everything you've said today, everything that came out of your mouth has been true and accurate. Sarah says, yes, but it wasn't intentional. The investigator tells her to stand up, need you to turn around, face the wall, hands behind your back. Do you have anything in your pockets I should know about? Nope. Sarah says, why is this happening? And the investigator said, because George is dead. Sarah says, not intentionally. The investigator said, hey, we understand that. He's still dead. She says, someone needs to call Ryan, please, or can I not make a phone call? The investigator said, you'll be able to make a phone call when you get down to the jail. She says, so why is this happening? So this was a trick? The investigator said, I'm here to ask you to explain a few things to us. And your response to everything was basically, I didn't do it. She kind of yells, intentionally. The investigator said, doesn't matter. It's still there. Sarah said, before you all said I could leave, that I was done after this. The investigator said, we were done. Yes, we were done. Sarah says, so now that's what it is? And the investigator says, we're done. Sarah says, right, not intentional. So what am I supposed to do now? Lucas is waiting for mom to come home. This is not my intention. I thought I was waiting for you all to come and figure out what's what and how many. And then the investigator said, yeah, that's what we're trying to do. Sarah said, I was going to be able to go home, see Lucas. Now he's just not going to have me come. So there's nothing I can do. The investigator says, not right now. Sarah says, there's nothing I can do in order to go home and see Lucas and prepare right now. Investigator says, not right now. You'll be afforded a time in court. You'll be afforded an attorney. You'll be afforded a chance to talk to a judge, and all that stuff will be worked out. But what the time frame for that, though? Don't know. You'll be afforded a time in court. You'll be afforded an attorney. You'll be afforded a chance to talk to a judge, and all that stuff will be worked out. Sarah says, but what's the time frame for that, though? The investigator's like, don't know. Sarah said, I had a sneaking suspicion that this was going to happen, and I need water. Like, really bad, please. You all tricked me down here. The investigator said, absolutely did not. She looks off in the doorway. I don't know what she's referring to, but she said, I just got those, okay? The investigator says, those are not allowed in the jail. Sarah says, so I can't even smoke a cigarette before I go? And what am I supposed to do with my car? The investigator says, well, when you get to the jail, you'll have free phones. You'll be able to call. Sarah interrupts, how long would that take? Because I need to talk to Brian. An officer comes in to transport Sarah to the jail. She explains all she's going to do is take her there, sign some papers. The investigator says, Sarah, the holding cells, I'm going to be put in one of those. And the investigator says, I don't know. Sarah says, the last time I had a panic attack. The investigator said, let them know that. And then they tell her, you're familiar with the Big Bay. And as long as you go in and you're civil, they'll put you in the Big Bay. Sarah said, can you request that while I'm here? The investigator's like, we don't work at the jail. Sarah reiterates, last time I had a major panic attack. What am I going to do with my purse? The investigator said, your purse is just going to come, but the cigarettes and stuff can't. Sarah shakes her head. Then Sarah says, what made you all decide to do this? The investigator said, you made us decide to do this. George is dead. Sarah said, you guys, I knew this was going to happen. Okay, so I come down here willingly. The investigator says, yes, absolutely. We were trying to figure out what's going on. We're still trying to figure out. Sarah says, unintentionally. The investigator said, unintentionally or not, George is dead. The investigator says, you act like when you say unintentionally, that absolves you from everything. Sarah says, I have things in my car that I need to, well, I have my medication. The investigator explains they have a pharmacy there. So if there's something you need, you can have it right away. Tells her she'll be seeing a nurse. They'll be able to take care of any kind of stuff, but that is out of his pay grade. And that was the end of the video. So long couple of episodes on this, but now we're going to get into all these hearings and the shenanigans she's pulled since her arrest. I think she's on lawyer number 6. And I think even the last lawyer said maybe her best bet's going to be to represent herself. So there you go, guys. I finally got around to this case. We're not done yet. This could take up some of the week with going through these court hearings, going through things that have come out since this interrogation video. I will update other cases. We will stay on top of anything if it breaks. All right, guys, you have a great rest of your day. We'll see you soon.